If you're ready to explore the Hebrew roots of your Christian faith, then grab your Bible and let's get started.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Reconcile the Kingdom, where we're working towards becoming a harmony of the whole word of truth. My name is Patrice Robinson, and I appreciate every last one of you who's able to join me on the live premiere, and also those who are able to join me on the replay. You all are most definitely appreciated. So we always begin with a recap from last week. But before we go to the recap, remember the housekeeping things. The scrolls at the bottom kind of remind you what to do for YouTube and Facebook and all those type of things. So I kind of have those prompts because we get stuck into the teaching that we forget to do those things. So those are just the housekeeping things. So let's get straight to the recap because we have a lot to cover on today. Last week, we had discussed Yeshua, the Messiah, who was healing people with the fringes of his garment. Now, when we do hear about him healing through the fringes, his seeds of his garment, you mainly hear about the woman of the issue of blood. But clearly, last week we went through there were many people getting healed in that manner. And so there is so much more to Yeshua's ministry than many people even share, even begin to read about. So those are the things, one of the things that we covered. And Yeshua's ministry, I don't know how many more times I can say this, is very, very important. It's important to our walk. So I have my mind when I look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the book of Acts and the first two chapters in the book of Revelation. I see those as training manuals from Yeshua on how to be a disciple. So remember, the disciples had the foundation of the scriptures. And many of us who come new to the faith, we lack that understanding. We lack that foundation, which makes us misinterpret the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, because that's the mindset that we're in. But you understand more as we go on through today's teaching. But it's also important to understand the spiritual matters. As we read last week, that some of the disciples that were following Yeshua at that time left because they lacked the understanding of spiritual matters. They left his ministry because of that. And this is because he began to teach about the spiritual matter of eating his flesh and drinking his blood. So, although he even told them these are spiritual things, they still lacked the understanding, and which led them to leave the ministry because of that lack of understanding. So, once again, I am very thankful that you have joined me on today and also those who will be joining me on the replay, because we're on a journey that many people do not take. They will not explore the gospel writings, follow the footsteps, the ministry of what our Messiah had said, what he did, what he taught. They're not following this because if they follow it, it will cause them to rethink what they're learning, what they're understanding, and what they are teaching. So you don't have many people on this journey. So I'm encouraging you to share this link, share this right now with your friends and family, because we're on a journey to understand what the master teacher has said and what he had did, especially on today. Today is important. I did not realize how much misunderstanding from Yeshua's teaching that still occur today. If I did not take the time out for this teaching today to look at different versions of the Bible, looking at different commentaries, I would not understood how this teaching today has been misunderstood for many, many years, hundreds of years. So it's important for today that we pay attention, that we listen to every word that's going to be coming forth out of my mouth today, because we are going to read Yeshua's teaching, what he had taught, and how it applies to us today. And it's amazing to me, and we will find out as we go on. So remember to have your Bible before you, your pen, your paper, all your writing utensils that you need for today, especially a highlighter. And remember, I say the highlighter is much needed because we're looking at different events, historical events, and seeing from the different perspectives and bringing it all together. So, for your notes, we are going to be in Matthew chapter 15, verses 1 through 21, and Mark chapter 7, verses 1 through 23. And I'm going to kind of slow down with this reading because I want you to understand every word that is being said. So I'm not meaning no disrespect. I'm not calling anyone, stupid or anything like that. I just want you to hear every word that is being said on today. And you will, as we go on, you will understand why I'm doing it this way. So open your Bible. We're going to go through Matthew chapter 15 first, 15 verses 1 through 21. And I'm going to try to read this slowly. Then some Pharisees and scribes came to Yeshua from Jerusalem and said, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread." And he answered and said to them, "Why do you yourselves transgress the commandment of Elohim for the sake of your tradition? For Elohim said, 'Honor your father and mother,' and he who speaks evil of father or mother is to be put to death. But you say," he's talking to the Pharisees and the scribes, "whoever says to his father or mother, 'Whatever I have that would help you has been given to Elohim,' he is not to honor his father or his mother. By this you invalidated the word of Elohim for the sake of your tradition. You hypocrites, rightly did Isaiah prophesy of you. These people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far away from me. But in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the precepts of men." After Yeshua called the crowd to him, he said to them, "Hear and understand. It is not what enters into the mouth that defiles the man, but what proceeds out of the mouth, this defiles the man." Then the disciples came and said to him, "Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this statement?" But he answered and said, "Every plant which my heavenly Father did not plant shall be uprooted. Let them alone. They are blind guides of the blind, and if the blind man guides a blind man, both will fall into a pit." Verse 15. Peter said to him, "Explain the parable to us." And Yeshua said, "Are you still lacking in understanding also? Do you not understand that everything that goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and is eliminated? But the things that proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and those defile the man. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, slanders. These are the things which defile the man. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile the man. And Yeshua went away from there and withdrew into the district of Tyre and Sidon. So this is Matthew's writing that we're reading. And remember, after the teaching, you have time to ask questions. I encourage you to ask those questions. Now we're going to take a look at Mark. Mark chapter 7, verses 1 through 23. Highlight the differences that you are recognizing. All of this, every word that I just read in Matthew is important. And every word that I'm going to read in Mark is important. So I'm going to read them again slowly, enough for you to understand what is going on. The Pharisees and some of the scribes gathered around him, and they had come from Jerusalem and had seen that some of his disciples were eating their bread with impure hands, that is, unwashed. For the Pharisees and all the Jews did not eat unless they carefully washed their hands, thus observing the tradition of elders. And when they came from the marketplace, they did not eat unless they cleansed themselves. And there were many other things which they received in order to observe, such as the washing of cups and pitchers and copper pots. Verse 5 in Mark 7. The Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat their bread with impure hands?" And he said to them, this is Yeshua speaking, "Rightly did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written." Now he's teaching from the prophets. "These people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the precepts of men, neglecting the commandment of Elohim. You hold to traditions of men." He also said to them, "You are experts at setting aside the commandment of Elohim in order to keep your tradition. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and your mother, and he who speaks evil of father or mother is to be put to death.' But you, Pharisees, scribes, and traditions of men, you say, if a man says to his father or his mother, 'What I have that would help you is carbon,' that it is to say, given to Elohim. You no longer permit him to do anything of his father or mother, thus invalidating the word of Elohim by your tradition, which you have handed down, and you do many things such as that." After he called the crowd to him again, he began to say to them, "Listen to me, listen, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside of a man which can defile him if it goes into him. But the things which proceed out of man, what will defile the man? If anyone has ears to hear, let him hear." When when he had left the crowd and entered the house, this is after he left the crowd that he had called before him. He entered the house, and the disciples questioned him about the parable. Remember, it's a parable. And he said to them, "Are you so lacking in understanding also? Do you not understand whatever goes into a man from outside cannot defile a man, cannot defile him, because it does not go into his heart, but into his stomach and is eliminated? Thus has declared all foods clean. This is from the New American Standard Bible. So we're going to go into this. And he was saying that which proceeds out of man, that is what defiles the man. For from within, out of the heart of man, proceeding the evil thoughts, fornication, thefts, murders, adulteries, deeds of coveting and wickedness, as well as deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these evil things proceed from within and defile the man. Yeshua got up and went away from there to the region of Tyre. Man, it is so much in these passages that I feel that we probably can do 6, 8, up to 10-part series on this. But this is not where we're going to go today. It's just so much in here. And I'm going to make it as simple as I can, especially for those who do not have the foundation of the prophets, the writings, and the Torah. If you don't have that foundation, you will totally misunderstand these passages. So when I was doing my study, I was amazed at so many commentaries and how many Bible versions, like we just read in New American Standard Bible, misunderstood the parable that he is teaching. So what we have today, we have the Pharisees and the scribes who's watching Yeshua and his disciples and recognize that they are not upholding the traditions, the oral laws, the man-made commandments like they are. The Pharisees and scribes have specific teachings that has been passed down. This is what we got, this oral traditions, the Talmud and the sages and all these that are taught in Judaism. Because that tradition requires them washing in their hands and eating bread in the state of purity. So this is why they were saying that their hands and stuff, all that is impure. Keeping this in mind, this state of impurity, these commandments that the Pharisees and scribes are talking about, these tradition of man is nowhere near found in the Torah, the prophets, or the writing, not found in Jehovah's instructions that he gave to Moses to teach the people to uphold. This impurity, this state of impurity is not found. Again, these are traditions that has been passed down and taught to be more important than the commandments of Elohim, which we heard Yeshua said. Then what we have is Yeshua begin to teach from the prophets about what the people is practicing at his time, these traditions. So let's read what Isaiah 29:13 actually say. Remember, Isaiah is written thousands of years before Yeshua, and he's applying it to the time of him walking. And it should, no problem, you should be able to understand this applies today. Let's pay attention. Then Jehovah said, because these people approaches me with their words and honors me with their lips, but their heart is far away from me, and their reverence for me consists of the commandment of men that is taught. So this is Isaiah 29:13 that Yeshua brings over to his time to say, this applies to you, Pharisees and scribes, because you honor me with your lips. You are speaking the words out of your mouth, but your heart is away from me because the way you reverence me is by your commandments, about your teachings, about your traditions, and not by my words. This still applies today. These traditions in Judaism are messianic and some Hebrew roots. The kippah is worn, they have the prayer shawl, lighting of candles, and praying. Those are not found in the Torah, the prophets, and writing as a commandment for us to do. Christianity, denominational religious systems have their own traditions. Easter, Christmas, Sabbath, worship on a Sunday. All these things are not found in the Torah, in Jehovah's instructions that was taught to Moses for Moses to uphold the people for, which is what the people supposed to be doing in the time of Yeshua and what we should be doing on today. So let's pay attention. We're going to come into the Torah teaching that Yeshua is trying to teach the people. Yeshua says, this is him answering them, why do you yourselves transgress, neglect, invalidate the commandment of Elohim for the sake of your tradition, which is happening today? He's teaching from the Torah, and he says this about Moses. Moses said, honor your mother and your father, and he who speaks evil of the father, mother, is to be put to death. But you say, if a man says to his father or his mother, whatever I have that will help you is carbon, that is to say, given to Elohim, meaning when you see the word carbon, that's treasury. As long as they are given to the treasury, you no longer have to permit him to do anything for his mother and father. So as long as you're giving to the Pharisees and the scribes and to the treasury, you don't have to honor your mother and your father. You don't have to take care of your mother and father. That is what they were teaching the people of that day, and still teaching many of that on today. So he is Yeshua is telling them that they're breaking the Torah and putting their teachings, their commandments above the teachings of Jehovah, above the instructions that the Father has said to follow, which is the Father is the one that sent Yeshua. They are invalidating Jehovah's instructions. Do you realize anyone that teaches you not to no longer, or you're allowed to, no longer should you follow Jehovah's instructions, is doing the same thing that the Pharisees and the scribe and denominations that were in the land at the time of Yeshua, they're doing the same thing. They are doing the exact same thing even today. So let's put our thinking caps on. So this is important to understand. The people of Yeshua day are fully aware of the Torah, the prophets, and writings. They may not be obeying the commandments that's in the Torah, but they are aware of it because they taught that the traditions of man is more important. So this parable that Yeshua was sharing with them, you have to have some foundation in the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, because you have to understand what considers to defile the man. You need to understand what renders a person clean and unclean, clean and unclean eating. All these things you need to understand that we can understand the parable. Matthew, no, we're going to do Mark first. Mark 7:14 through 16. We're going to read the parable and then we're going to get an understanding of the parable. In Mark, he says, verse 14 through 16, after he called the crowd to him again, he began to saying to them, listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside the man which can defile him if it goes into him, but the things which proceed out of the man are what defile the man. If anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. This is the parable. Keep in mind, this is a parable. Matthew 15 and 16. I think it's verse 6. I think it's verse 10 or 11. He said to them, hear and understand. It is not what enters into the mouth that defiles the man, but what proceeds out of the mouth. This is what defiles a man. So the Pharisees, the scribes, and all of them were not happy of what he said. They have not been happy what Yeshua have been saying this entire time. Not because Yeshua was telling them to break the instructions of Jehovah, not because of all of that is why they're upset, because he was actually teaching them to follow the instructions, the Torah. Then he had to explain more details to the disciples because they lack the understanding of spiritual matters. Parable and spiritual matters. It's important to get those connections of that. So, in order to understand unclean and unclean, defiled, and all that stuff, you really need to understand Leviticus chapter 11, I believe 11, 12, 13. It might even go up to 15. And also there's some in Numbers. So it's in the Torah. We're not going to go through all those chapters. And once again, we probably can go through 6, 8, 10, even more parts to understand it fully. But again, we're trying to understand it now. So I'm going to help you understand this the best way that I can. So Leviticus 11 goes through that clean and unclean foods and all those type of things. Get this. The Torah doesn't teach you that food that you eat can make you unclean. The Torah does not teach you that. It does not teach you the food that you eat will make you unclean. The Torah does not teach you the unclean animal, touching the unclean animal makes you unclean. It doesn't teach you that. That's people's assumption. It doesn't teach you eating unclean animals will make you unclean. It does not teach you touching unclean animals make you unclean. So, anything that causes you to be unclean, that Jehovah considers unclean, has a time limit. He specifically has a number of days that anything that makes you unclean, he has a number of days that you will be unclean for. So I do also want to make this clear is that any animal that he put in the scriptures, and because in Leviticus 11 is basically where it is, there's unclean, he does not consider it food. Have to understand that. Any unclean animal that he said not to eat is not considered food. With that in mind, what we just talked about, let's continue on. We're going to read Leviticus 11, verse 39 through 40 I highly encourage you to read Leviticus 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 to get the grasp. Because if you don't understand clean and unclean, how do you understand Paul's writing? Because he talks about clean and unclean. Do not touch the unclean thing. But many people don't understand what the unclean thing is. But we're going to just focus on this. Leviticus 11, 39 through 40. Also, if one of the animals dies, which you have for food, the one who touches its carcass becomes unclean until evening. He too who eats some of its carcasses shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. And the one who picks up its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. These are animals that dies of its own. So understanding what carcass means. Carcass means an animal that died on its own, not an animal that you had killed to eat. There's two different things. And if you don't understand that, you won't understand how this clean animal that died on its own is considered unclean for you, and you'll be unclean till evening. That another limited time. It's important to understand that. He did not say if you eat unclean food that it will make you unclean. So remember, unclean food is considered detestable. It's abomination. These are not considered to be food. So it's not food. This is an unclean animal. So what we have, as I was looking through last night, many people take this parable to mean all food is clean. But Yeshua never said that. Literally, I have found in many of the Bibles, this New American Standard Bible, I think the Standard Bible, and other Bibles, actually adding in a parentheses or italic that he deemed all food clean. Yeshua never said all food is clean. So let's think about what they're saying. He's teaching the Pharisees, the scribes, his disciples, and many other people to follow the commandments of Jehovah that was taught to Moses. And then we're going to come around and say, he says, now don't follow that. He's going to teach you disobey. So he's going to teach you obey and then disobey. That is confusion. That is not what he is teaching. So the food you eat doesn't make you unclean. It's just unclean animals. However, let me say this. Let me give you another example of uncleanness, what will cause you unclean. So now we read about the animals. Touching a man or a woman when there's a discharge is unclean. You're unclean for 24 hours. Anytime the Bible considers a person unclean, like the woman of the issue of the blood, unclean to evening, it's 24 hours. And there's sometimes you unclean for 7 days, and sometimes you're unclean longer through the process of leprosy. So it really depends on the issue. And you would not know that unless you have the foundation of the Torah. So that's why the Torah is important. This is why every Tuesday it is dedicated to understanding the basics of the Torah. That's why Tuesday is dedicated just for that. At 7 o'clock p.m., you can join me on Facebook. You can join me on YouTube at 7 o'clock on Tuesdays. That is where we go into the Torah studies. That is the foundation. It's the foundation of understanding the whole word. If you only read the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, you will only have that mindset of Constantine, because that's when everything started. Constantine, the Romans, the Greeks found understanding. And I wouldn't even say Western, because it's the Greek and the Romans mindset of the word in the Brahadashah, because you wasn't raised up. You didn't understand how to apply the Torah, the prophets, and the writing to Yeshua's teaching. So that's the whole reason for Acts chapter 15. That's why he said for the Gentiles to go to the synagogue, because that's where Moses is being read. That's Acts 15. So this is important, because you lacking that information, you go under the teaching and doctrines of men, and you're missing the whole word of truth. Food does not speak from the heart. It is what comes out of the mouth of man that speaks from the heart. That's what defiles the man, because the heart is most definitely wicked. For in the heart, within it proceed evil thoughts, fornication, thefts, murders, adulteries, deeds of coveting, and wickedness, as well as deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All those things that the Torah tell you not to do, and more. For the Noah and Noah, Jehovah came to Noah in Genesis chapter 8 and talked to him about how evil men's heart. The intent of men's heart is evil in his youth. So he was passing judgment then. It's important to know what's in the heart. Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it? Who can understand the heart? Jehovah understands the heart. Yeshua is telling you it's a heart thing. It's a parable. It's a heart thing. What comes out of the man. But let's continue. Dear Yeshua, but he answered and said, every plant which my heavenly Father did not plant shall be uprooted. Let them alone. There are blind guides of the blind, and if a blind guides a blind man, both will fall in the pit. Matthew 15:12. So what does this say about the teachings of today? What does it say about what you're learning today? So remember the wheats and the tares. The angels are going to come separating and uprooting everything that Jehovah didn't plant, with everything that's not of the Father. The angels will be doing that part. And the Pharisees and the scribes became upset because what was defiled, basically disobedience. When you hear the word defile in this, you're hearing disobedience, because what was defiling them was the teaching and the commandments of man was coming out of their heart. This is why a teacher of the word will be held, well, the judgment will be more harshly, because a teacher has to line themselves up with Jehovah, with Yeshua. You cannot bring in the traditions of man, the commandments of man, and honor Jehovah. So this is why Isaiah 29:13, Leviticus 11:10, all of this applies today. Because the people approach me with their words and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me, and their reverence for me consists of the commandments of men that is taught. This is what defiled them. And this is why the Pharisees were offended because of this. And they understood what Yeshua was saying. Unfortunately, many of us don't understand what he's saying because we don't have that foundation. So, what does this mean to us today? We must learn what Yeshua is teaching. We must have that ear to hear. You have to pray to understand spiritual matters. That way, you can understand a parable of what Yeshua is teaching. Now, you do have an opportunity to ask questions, make any comments or anything like that. And that's okay if you don't have it right now. That's okay if you have to think about things and then send in questions. I answer those questions on the replay. So you can do that. Ask questions, make comments on the replay. You have an opportunity. I encourage it if you don't have them right now. But I also encourage you to study the word, put it together, and get an understanding of what Yeshua is teaching. Now, I hope you join me on Tuesdays. I will continue to do that because the people are lacking that understanding and misinterpret Yeshua's teaching, Peter's, Paul's, all of those New Testament Berhadashah teachings because the lack of the foundation. So that will continue. So join me on Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. And let's get an understanding of what Yeshua is teaching and also the New Testament writings. It's important to understand that. So, no questions, no comments. I don't see anything like that on today. I appreciate every last one of you who joined me on today. May Jehovah bless you and keep you. May Jehovah shine his face on you and give you his favor. May he shine his face towards you and give you his peace. In the mighty name of Yeshua, I pray. And I thank you once again for joining me on today. Have a blessed rest of the week.